The string lights over our backyard glowed like a stage I didn't belong to. People were cheering, lifting glasses, cameras, flashing, all for my sister. Not one person seemed to notice I was turning 18 that night. I stood behind a row of champagne flutes, the heat from the lanterns sticking to my skin, watching the MC tap his mic and shout, "Let's celebrate Evelyn." 18 again. Something in me stopped. Even the music felt wrong. I set my glass down slowly, quietly, and in that moment I realized this party would become the last memory my family ever had of me, though they didn't know it yet. I grew up in a house where light always seemed to fall in the same direction toward my sister. Even as kids, Evelyn never had to ask for attention. It arrived for her the way summer heat settles over Austin, heavy and automatic. I learned early how to move around it, how to make myself small so the beams wouldn't burn. I must have been 8 the first time I realized what my role was. Evelyn had a cheer competition, and Mom spent the entire morning curling her hair, spraying glitter on her cheeks, pinning a bow so big it brushed her shoulders. I stood in the doorway holding my own brush, waiting for someone to notice me. They didn't. Dad only glanced over long enough to say, "Sweetie, be helpful," and grab her water bottle. So I did, and that became the pattern, me helping her shining. By middle school, it was routine. Evelyn talked, I listened. She won, I clapped. She needed something, I carried it. At family dinners, relatives would pull her into conversations about her future, her beauty, her potential. When they turned to me, their questions were gentler, thinner, polite in a way that made the air feel tight. "How's school?" Still drawing. Then their attention drifted back to her, like I'd only filled a pause. But the moment that never let me go happened when I was 15. I'd spent weeks making a scrapbook for her birthday sketches, little watercolor corners, a layout I'd worked on every night under my desk lamp. I remember wrapping it in brown paper, tying it with twine, feeling proud in a quiet way. She opened it in front of our parents, flipped 2 pages, stopped. "It's cute," she said, smiling at her reflection in the tablet Mom had just handed her. "But I mean, Mom bought me something real this year." She set the scrapbook aside. The spine bent when it hit the table. Something inside me did too. Later that night, sitting on my bedroom floor, I tore out one of the pages, a sketch of a room I imagined I'd design one day. Tall windows, soft light, a chair facing the sunrise. I held that page for a long time, wondering if anything I made would ever matter to them. The rest of the scrapbook went into the back of my closet. The single page went into my sketchbook. It's still there. As I got older, the imbalance sharpened instead of fading. Evelyn got a car at 16. I got the privilege of helping her pick paint for it. She had friends over. I brought snacks. When relatives came to visit, they asked about her grades, her prom dress, her college plans. Mine were polite afterthoughts. Mom used to say I was independent, the kind of daughter who didn't need much. It sounded like praise until I realized it was permission to overlook me to save their energy for the child who demanded more. Dad once told me, "You're steady, Autumn. Evelyn's fragile. She needs us more." But fragility never seemed to stop her from stepping on everything in her way. By 17, I'd learned to read the house like a map. The noisy rooms belonged to them. The quiet ones were mine. I stopped asking for things, rides, help, attention. Silence became easier, predictable, safe. And yet, somewhere under all that quiet, a tiny part of me still waited for a moment when someone might look at me the way they looked at her, for a chance to be seen without having to earn it. I only realized how foolish that hope was the night of my 18th birthday, when a single sentence confirmed what I'd always known. In this family, visibility was a privilege, not a birthright. I knew the heat that night wasn't just the summer air. It clung to me the moment I stepped into the backyard, a reminder that my place in this family was always a few steps behind everyone else. The string lights draped over the patio flickered against the pool, throwing gold across faces that weren't looking at me. I stood near the edge of the crowd, hands still sticky from arranging the last set of candles on the tables. Mom had handed me a lighter earlier and said, "Make sure everything looks perfect before guests arrive." She didn't say happy birthday. When the MC tapped the microphone, the vibrations ran through the glass in my hand. People turned. Conversations paused. A small hush lifted the heat from the air. "Let's give a huge cheer." he said to Evelyn, celebrating her 18th again. The crowd erupted. I didn't. For a second, everything blurred, the lanterns, the voices, Evelyn's bright smile as she stepped forward in a white dress she bought just for the night. My eyes landed on the cake. 3 tiers, frosting like marble, her name written across the top in gold. My name wasn't anywhere. I felt Mom touch my arm, soft but firm enough to keep me still. "Don't step up," she whispered. "It'll confuse people." Confuse people. At my own birthday. I looked at Dad. He didn't meet my eyes. He was clapping too loudly the way people clap when they're pretending nothing is wrong. Evelyn made a wish. Cameras flashed. Guests chanted her name. Someone beside me said, "She looks amazing." This is so her night. And suddenly I understood something sharp and simple. There was no mistake. No misunderstanding. This wasn't my celebration accidentally overtaken. It was theirs intentionally reassigned. My throat felt tight, but my breathing stayed steady. I did what I always did, quiet, contained, unseen. I lifted my glass halfway as if to join the toast, then set it down before it reached my lips. Nobody noticed. A small piece of wax dripped from a candle onto the tablecloth. I watched it harden pale and final. Then I turned, walked past the laughter, past the music, past the house that had never been mine. Barefoot on the warm pavement dress brushing my knees, I didn't look back. Not even once. I didn't run. I just kept walking until the music from the backyard faded into a distant hum, swallowed by the heat and the empty stretch of the neighborhood street. The pavement was still warm under my feet, but the air had cooled enough to sting my skin. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew I couldn't stay. When the bus finally appeared at the stop on the main road, its headlights cut through the dark like a quiet invitation. I stepped on without thinking. The driver glanced at my dress at my bare feet, then back at the road. He didn't ask questions. I was grateful for that. The door folded shut behind me with a hiss. That sound felt like a line being drawn. I took a seat near the back. The engine rumbled low and steady, and for the first time all night, there was no one telling me to smile, to be quiet, to stand aside. Just the hum of wheels on asphalt, the flicker of streetlights against the windows, and the faint smell of old coffee lingering in the air. Somewhere between Austin and the next town, I reached into my purse and pulled out my sketchbook. The cover was worn soft from years of being handled edges, frayed corners bent. My fingers brushed the page where the drawing had been torn years ago. The empty imprint of that missing sheet stared back at me. I flipped to a blank page and rested the pencil against it. A room began to take shape, tall windows, open light, a single chair turned toward the sunrise. I didn't know it yet, but that was the first draft of the life I was about to build. The bus carried me north through the night. Each hour felt like a quiet, shedding the weight of Dad's silence, the precision of Mom's control. Evelyn's shadow stretching across every room. By dawn, when the skyline of New York rose in the distance, something in me settled. Not peace, not hope, just resolve. Queens was the only place I could afford. A narrow room with peeling paint, a window facing a brick wall, and a radiator that clanked whenever it felt like waking up. I paid the deposit with the summer internship money I'd saved $600 total. When the door closed behind me, the silence echoed. Not empty. Open. I set my sketchbook on the windowsill. The space felt small, but it felt mine. My days became a montage of survival. Opening shifts at a small cafe. Steam rising from milk pitchers. Wiping tables until my hands ached. Faint jazz playing through old speakers. And every night, classes on my laptop. Notes scribbled until the margins disappeared. Building digital models between the sounds of traffic and the thin walls around me. I didn't talk much. I didn't need to. People in the city barely looked at each other. That anonymity was a gift. One morning, while wiping down the counter, an older woman approached. She carried herself with the calm precision of someone who understood space the way others understand language. She pointed to a napkin on which I'd unconsciously sketched a corner of the cafe. "You drew this?" she asked. I nodded. She studied the lines for a long moment, then said, "You see the room. Most people only see objects." Her name was Marisol Hale. I would learn later she was known in certain circles for turning abandoned warehouses into homes with soul. That day, she simply handed me her card. "Come by the studio," she said. "I might have a space for you." It wasn't a promise. It was an opening. At her studio, a converted warehouse with brick walls and afternoon light pouring through skylights, Marisol looked through my sketches, each one spread across a long oak table. Her finger paused on the page with the imagined room, the one I'd drawn on the bus. "You build from absence," she murmured. I didn't ask what that meant. I understood. The internship she offered paid almost nothing, but it gave me access to the tools, the scraps of wood, the fabric samples, the empty rooms waiting to be redesigned. I swept floors labeled materials, learned how light behaves against stone, how texture can soften a wound you don't name aloud. My routine changed again. Studio by day, work by night, sketchbook always in my bag. I learned to listen to space, how it breathes when you shift a chair, how shadows can make a room honest. Marisol rarely praised me, but when she did, it was with sentences that felt like anchors. "You work like someone who's had to earn every inch. You understand quiet. You design with memory." I built furniture from reclaimed pieces, a table from old beams, a lamp from rusted copper, a chair that creaked like it remembered something. Every project became a way to rebuild myself in fragments. 3 years passed in that rhythm of grind and growth. I worked until my fingers bruised, until my eyes blurred at 2 in the morning, until the girl who left Austin barefoot no longer felt like someone I knew. She was still inside me, but quieter, like an echo I had learned to respect instead of obey. Then one evening, Marisol placed a stack of files on my desk. "Clients asked for you by name," she said. Just that. No smile, no ceremony. But I felt the shift. The first breath of a life that wasn't borrowed or inherited, but built. That night in my tiny room with the brick wall window, I made a spreadsheet. Expenses, savings, supplies, projected costs, potential clients. A list titled "Steps to Independence." I typed, checked, filed, deleted, rearranged. No noise, just decisions settling into place. By morning, I had a plan, a real one. Autumn Atelier would be mine. My studio, my space, my name. The bus had carried me away. My work would carry me forward. This time, I wasn't running. I was building. This time, I wouldn't fix what they had broken. The morning my TED Talk went live, I didn't think anything would change. It had been a quiet event in a small auditorium filled with people who listened carefully and left without applause that echoed. I told a story without names, a girl whose 18th birthday had been taken from her, who walked out mid-party and chose silence as a boundary. 2 days later, my inbox cracked open. Messages, requests, articles, clips shared with captions like, "This is what healing looks like." The video passed 1 million views before I even processed the first wave. I didn't respond. I kept moving: studio mornings, sketch revisions, client calls, Luca handing me coffee that was always too sweet. Routine kept the noise at a distance. Then the interviews started. Magazines wanted to talk about the girl rebuilding herself. Design blogs asked about my process. Podcasts asked about resilience. I kept my answers short. I let silence frame the rest. The first tremor came from Texas. A text from my mother. "We saw the video. Evelyn is upset. Maybe you should check on her." No acknowledgement of the talk, no recognition of the work. Just the same gravitational pull toward Evelyn. I didn't answer. Later, my father wrote, "Congratulations on your success. But please understand, your sister feels targeted." Targeted by a story with no names. The familiarity stung more than the message itself. I set the phone aside and kept measuring a slab of reclaimed oak for a shelving project. The tape clicked cleanly against the edge. Nothing in my hands trembled. The next morning, Luca came running in with his tablet. "You need to see this." A gossip site had posted an interview with Evelyn. Her face filled the screen, composed, practiced. Headline: "Sister of viral designer says people don't know the real story." I didn't open it at first. The glow from the tablet reflected off the metal drafting ruler on my desk. When I finally read it, the words were predictable. She exaggerates for attention. We always treated her well. She left because she couldn't handle comparisons. I hope she's okay, but the internet doesn't know the truth. I didn't feel anger, just confirmation. Some people collapse without being the center. By evening, the wildfire had started screenshots, stitched reactions people pulling years of Evelyn's old posts that contradicted everything she'd said. Comment sections turned heavy and fast. Still, I stayed silent. Silence has weight. It tilts truth toward the surface. That night, I filed the paperwork to expand Autumn Atelier into a full studio, signed the final Manhattan lease, updated registrations, transferred funds, closed loops that had been open for years. Each signature felt like a quiet door shutting behind me. No slamming, just closure. A week later, the TED Talk hit 5 million views. A boutique hotel wanted me to design their lobby. A brand wanted a collaboration. Clients wrote that my work made their spaces feel like breathing again. Meanwhile, Evelyn's accounts spiraled comments, disabled sponsorships, paused, her perfect content drowned under critiques from strangers who recognized patterns they'd lived themselves. Marisol stopped by one afternoon watching me adjust a lighting mock-up. "You don't have to explain anything she said. They're doing that work for you." I nodded, though something deep inside my chest tightened, an old ache separating from its root. That night, as I lined books on the studio shelves, my phone buzzed. An email, sender Evelyn. I hovered for a moment, then opened it. One sentence. I didn't know it would hurt this much to be unseen. The words sat on the screen like something fragile and unfinished. Not an apology, not responsibility. Just the first honest thing she'd said in years. I didn't reply. Some endings aren't meant to be softened. By week's end, Autumn Atelier opened its doors. Clients filtered in under the tall windows. Journalists took notes quietly. Light moved across the polished floor like something settling into place. I walked through the space, my space, with the steadiness of someone who rebuilt herself without approval. Justice didn't arrive loudly. It stitched itself through the system, through consequences, through silence. The reversal was complete. Balance restored. When the noise finally settled, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like air, clean, unclaimed, filling the corners of my loft. New York had a way of holding silence differently. Not heavy, not punishing, just present. Most nights I stayed late at the studio, letting the dim pendant lights fall across unfinished models and stacks of reclaimed wood. The city outside pulsed in soft intervals, distant sirens, a gust of wind sweeping past the window, the low rumble of trains moving underground. All of it blending into a rhythm that didn't ask anything of me. I found myself gravitating toward the olive tree in the center of the loft. Its leaves brushed the skylight, now catching the last of the evening glow. 3 years ago, I could barely keep a plant alive in a dark room in Queens. Now, this one grew taller than my reach. Sometimes I'd sit on the floor with my back against the cool brick wall sketchbook open on my lap. The pencil moved softly lines, light corners of imagined rooms. No deadlines, no expectations, just space becoming shape. I thought about Austin less and less, not out of bitterness, but out of distance. The house that once felt like the entire world now existed like an outline, recognizable, but empty. Evelyn's email replayed in my mind once, then faded like background static. Unanswered. Not ignored, simply unnecessary. There were no more phone calls from my parents after that. No questions, no justifications. Their silence used to feel like erasure. Now it felt like room to breathe. One evening, I finished setting up the final piece for my exhibition. A cube of glass glowing softly from within. Inside only a chair and an unadorned stretch of white wall. Not meant to impress. Meant to feel like the first clean moment after a storm. I turned off the gallery lights until only that cube remained. Gold spilling across the concrete floor in a quiet pool. Walking back into my loft later, I noticed how the city lights flickered across the window, merging with the reflection of my living space. My home built from nothing but years of quiet rebuilding. I exhaled slowly, the air cool against my lips. For the first time in my life, I didn't wonder who might be watching. I was enough company on my own. Some people rebuild their lives by shouting their pain into the world. I rebuilt mine by turning the lights on in a room no one ever thought I'd own. Silence didn't break me. It shaped the walls, the floor, the doorway I finally walked through without fear. And standing here now, looking at the city breathing below my windows, I understand something simple. You don't have to go back to the place that erased you to prove you exist. You can build forward. If my story stayed with you, stay for the next one. Let's keep walking toward the light.